Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a really fascinating puzzle in the world of sustainability and finance. Think about it. How do we actually evaluate ESG, environmental, social, and governance, performance in the advertising and marketing sector? It's an industry that literally does everything. You've got shops printing local direct mail flyers, all the way up to massive tech giants running global, data-driven digital campaigns. Because the scale of operations is just so wildly different from one company to the next, measuring their true sustainability risks requires a very specific toolkit. And that brings us right to the core problem of scale and comparability. Ask yourself this critical investor question. How do investors compare a small boutique agency to a massive multinational holding group? I mean, a boutique agency might just handle creative graphics, right? Meanwhile, a holding group could own dozens of agencies globally, managing massive troves of data analytics, media buying, and PR. If we just look at raw numbers, the data is completely skewed by the sheer size of the multinational. We absolutely need a way to level the playing field. So, what's the solution? They use activity metrics. We show how to measure median reach, total exposures, frequency of exposure, and total employee count to normalize ESG performance data across the industry. This is exactly how we quantify the true scale of an advertising entity's operations, making those apples-to-apples comparisons finally possible. Let's break down how this data funnel actually works. These 4 specific activity metrics act as a filter, taking raw numbers and turning them into a standardized baseline so we can accurately judge sustainability risks. First up, median reach. That's the percentage of a target audience actually exposed to an ad. Second, the number of exposures, which you probably know as online impressions. Third is median frequency, meaning how many times those targeted individuals actually see the campaign. And fourth, the total number of employees. By running any ESG metric, say a carbon footprint or diversity numbers, through this specific activity funnel, investors can calculate a normalized rate of performance, totally regardless of how big the company is. Now, it's pretty important to know where these standards actually come from. The framework we're exploring today is from the SASB standards. And as of August 2022, these are now under the authoritative stewardship of the International Sustainability Standards Board, or the ISSB, which sits under the IFRS Foundation. This backing gives these metrics some incredible global weight and real credibility in the financial world. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll be covering 4 main areas: normalizing advertising data, navigating data privacy, ensuring advertising integrity, and finally, workforce diversity and inclusion. Let's jump in. Section 1. Normalizing advertising data, the activity metrics funnel. When you look at the overview of the standard, notice how it distinctly separates the objective scale metrics at the very bottom from the qualitative disclosure topics at the top. The activity metrics sit structurally as the foundation. They aren't the risks themselves, right? Instead, they work in conjunction with those 3 major topics at the top to facilitate fair, accurate comparisons across the entire advertising and marketing sector within the Sustainability Industry Classification System, or SICS. Section 2. Navigating data privacy, balancing targeting and protection. Okay, so in a world of massive digital footprints, this standard focuses heavily on what we call custom audiences. These are individuals targeted based on highly specific personal data. We're talking demographic data, like your age or homeownership, behavioral data, like your online browsing patterns, and even location data, like GPS coordinates tracking your physical movement. Tracking all of this obviously requires some incredibly strict policy oversight. Because of this, the standard actually requires companies to report the exact percentage of their online advertising impressions that are targeted to these custom audiences. Why? Because a higher percentage simply equals a higher privacy risk profile. To mitigate that risk, agencies must disclose exactly how they handle consumer data at every single stage of what's called the information lifecycle. They have to detail their collection methods, like do they require a user to actively opt in or do they just rely on an opt-out action? They've got to explain data use. Are they keeping it internal or are they sharing, renting, or selling it to third parties? They also must disclose their data retention durations and security practices. And finally, they need to show how they use privacy impact assessments, or PIAs, to proactively evaluate and mitigate these risks before an issue ever occurs. And this right here brilliantly illustrates the bottom line for investors. When that information lifecycle breaks down, it inevitably leads to legal proceedings. So the standard requires entities to report the exact total amount of monetary losses in the entity's presentation currency incurred from civil, regulatory, or criminal actions regarding consumer privacy. Investors literally need to know the exact amount of money lost due to unauthorized data sharing or privacy breaches, excluding legal defense fees. It is a direct, undeniable measure of a company's failure in risk management. Section 3. Ensuring advertising integrity, truthfulness, and compliance. Advertising agencies bear a serious legal responsibility to ensure their creative campaigns are truthful and not deceptive. The standard creates a really brilliant contrast here between reactive damage and proactive protection. On one side, companies must disclose monetary losses from legal proceedings associated with false, deceptive, or unfair advertising. That's your reactive cost of failing. But on the other side, companies must disclose the percentage of their campaigns reviewed by a self-regulatory assessment procedure. This is the proactive protection, actively checking campaigns for legality, decency, honesty, and social responsibility to ensure they aren't exploiting or misleading consumers. Naturally, investors want to see high self-regulatory compliance to avoid those nasty legal fines down the road. The really crucial point here is that investors also specifically track the percentage of revenue tied to highly regulated products like alcohol and tobacco to gauge regulatory exposure. If a massive chunk of an agency's revenue is coming from creating campaigns for products that face extreme rules, intense media restrictions, and strict warning label requirements, well, that agency carries a uniquely elevated level of risk, and that is something an investor absolutely must account for. Section 4. Workforce diversity and inclusion. Reflecting target markets. In this industry, your ultimate competitive advantage comes from producing creative, innovative ideas. As the SASB standard puts it, connecting with a target market relies to a significant extent on employing a workforce that reflects the communities in that market. Diversity isn't just some compliance metric here, it is a critical, measurable factor in producing innovative ideas, reaching diverse global audiences effectively, and ultimately improving the financial performance of the agency. Simply put, you cannot authentically sell to a global demographic if your creative team doesn't reflect that demographic. To measure this accurately, the standard requires a precise, tiered breakdown of gender and diversity representation, running all the way from the C-suite down to entry-level staff. It's just not enough to give a broad, company-wide average anymore. Entities must categorize representation across executive management, non-executive management, professionals, and all other employees. This is a game changer because it stops companies from hiding top-heavy homogeneity by just overhiring diverse candidates at the lowest entry levels. But, the data is just part of the story. Beyond the raw numbers, entities must disclose the actual policies and programs they use to achieve and maintain this equitable representation globally. It involves real actionable steps, maintaining transparent hiring and wage practices, establishing genuine mentorship and sponsorship programs, partnering with employee resource groups, and offering flexible work schedules to accommodate the varying needs of a diverse workforce. Well, we've covered a lot of ground today. We've seen how activity metrics establish a baseline of scale, how targeted audiences test the boundaries of data privacy, how self-regulation defends against deceptive ad lawsuits, and how a truly diverse workforce drives market connection. I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. If your scale is completely normalized by the activity metrics funnel, does your underlying ESG data reveal a highly resilient, innovative agency, or does it expose an entity dangerously vulnerable to privacy breaches and integrity risks? Apply these tools, look closely at the normalized data, and the true health of the business will reveal itself. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.